Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to wherever you are watching from in the world. I'm Jenny McCullum, Assistant Director of the Sephardic Studies Program at the University of Washington, and I'm thrilled to welcome you all to the 10th Annual Ladino Day, the Future of Ladino. Before we begin our program, the University of Washington wishes to acknowledge the Coast Salish peoples of this land, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Puyallup, Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. This event is supported by the Lucy Benveniste Cavish Endowed Fund for Sephardic Studies, and additionally made possible by the support of multiple UW departments, as well as the generosity of several local and national community organizations. Many of you are online in the audience today, and on behalf of us all, I thank you for your generosity. I also want to thank the dedicated colleagues at the Strom Center for Jewish Studies who work every day to bring thoughtful and integral academic programming to new audiences. Sarah Zadis Rosen, Kara Schoonmaker, Grace Elizabeth D., Brendan Goldman, and Lauren Ben-Sesson. This event is testament to their tireless efforts, and we are all so appreciative. This year's Ladino Day is particularly meaningful as it marks a decade that the University of Washington, in collaboration with the global Sephardic community, has put on this anticipated event. Created 10 years ago to celebrate the rich context and history of this language, Ladino Day 2022 represents not only the enduring legacy of Ladino, but celebrates the linguistic resource, point of connection, and timeless vernacular that Ladino continues to offer its speakers worldwide. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Isaac Alhadeff Professor of Sephardic Studies and Chair of the Sephardic Studies Program, Devin Naar.
Merci mucho, querida Jenny. Bienvenidos a todos. It's a great pleasure to be here today. Thanks to Jenny and the staff and all of our supporters for making today's program possible, and bienvenidos a todos. We've had over 500 people register for our program today, and we're very excited about it. It's hard to believe that we're at the 10th Ladino Day, and we hope that the video that you've just seen offers you a sense of what Ladino Day has been about, and also a way to offer a tribute to the Ladineros here in Seattle, who in previous years prior to the pandemic played such a central role in our Ladino Day programs. I also would like to take the opportunity to wish my older son Vidal a happy birthday, because 7 years ago, after giving my opening remarks for our Ladino Day program at the University of Washington, I ran off the stage to the hospital as my spouse had gone into labor. So Vidal is a Ladino Day baby. Vidalico, que tengas años muchos y buenos. I'm really thrilled to have our panelists with us today for this conversation about the future of Ladino. And I have to say, I'm really looking forward to their perspectives because as a historian, I'm oftentimes focused on the past. But today we're going to be talking a little bit also about the present and the future. Three of them I've known for about 20 years since I was a student, and one representing a younger generation I've only known in the last few years, but I think the four of these guests will really provide us with a wonderful opportunity for conversation. Just brief introductions about our panelists. I would say that, when I first began my studies and research about Sephardic history and Ladino culture, one of the first places I wound up going was Ladinokomunita. And at that time, it was a relatively new and novel platform, a Ladino correspondence circle. And it was through the Ladinokomunita that I met its founder, Rachel Amado Bortnick. The forward has rightly called Rachel America's internet champion of Ladino. She really has brought Ladino into the 21st century when we were still in the 1990s, and has been one of the most influential figures writing about and promoting Ladino in the world. And my interactions and conversations and correspondence with her have been incredibly informative for me personally and for my family. So grateful to have Rachel with us. I first met Karen Gerson Şarhon shortly thereafter at the first academic conference that I attended, which was a conference organized in Salonika by Reina Molcho on Judeo-Spanish culture. Karen is not only a researcher and a scholar, but also a journalist, the editor of the only Ladino newspaper in the world, El Amaneser, based in Jerusalem. And on top of that, she is also a singer who has recorded numerous Ladino albums, and most recently an actor who had a cameo in the hit Turkish television series Kulüp, The Club, which was the subject of a previous Sephardic Studies event. And I should add that the encyclopedia, the Women's Jewish Encyclopedia, which Rachel wrote, by the way, calls Karen the doyenne of Sephardic culture today. I think that's a very apt title as well. At that same conference where I met Karen, I also met Eliezer Papo. Eliezer is the director of the Moshe David Gaon Center for Ladino Studies at Ben Gurion University in the Negev. And Eliezer is a prominent scholar of Ladino culture whose wide-ranging work deals with the whole gamut of expression in Ladino culture, from parodies of the Agadah of Passover to Ladino female writers like Laura Papa Bojoreta, magical spells, and a whole range of other themes. He's not only writes about Ladino culture, but is one of the few scholars writing original scholarship in Ladino. He was also featured in a documentary film, El Último Sephardi, The Last Sephardic Jew, in which we get another sense of Eliezer, not only as a scholar and an activist, but also as a chacham, as a rabbi dedicated to keeping the customs of his native Sarajevo and of the Sephardic communities more generally alive for us. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you all today to our panel discussion. My final guest is Nesi Altaras, who I first met just before the pandemic began when I spoke at McGill University, where he was a graduate student. And I was thrilled to see Nesi, a younger person, not only invested in studying Ladino, but also creating in Ladino. He is the editor of Avlaremoz, which is a Turkish-Jewish newspaper that seeks to express, boldly, I would say, a new kind of Turkish-Jewish voice, even if it goes against prevailing expectations. Nesi has written about the reception of the Spanish nationality law among Sephardim. He's written an essay that includes a Ladino glossary of queer terminology and another essay about how to talk about Ashkenazi Jews in Ladino, plus commentary on Kulüp and more. So, bienvenidos a todos, and Aida, let's get started. So, I'd like to ask each of you to share an expression or a refrain or a phrase that, from your perspective, captures some defining feature of Ladino, something that maybe is untranslatable or embodies an attitude or a perspective that you see as particularly or essentially Sephardi. And explain it for us, too. Let's begin. Let's go in the order in which I introduce you. So please, Rachel, why don't you start us off?
Merci mucho, querido Devin. You are a symbol of the future of Ladino, I think. And thank you so much for inviting me and for the nice introduction. If I may make one little correction, I know Karen is eager that that correction be made, and that is that El Amaneser is based in Istanbul, not in Jerusalem, not in Jerusalem.
Oh, did I say that? I'm sorry. Yeah, that is a mistake. Thank
well,
you.
I have two expressions and proverb to share with you that I think really says a lot, both about the language and about Sephardic philosophy of life. The two expressions that I chose to bring out one is berachai salu, which we say when we see somebody eating something, or somebody says that the food is very good, or we say berachai salu. Why is that typical and unique? Because it is Hebrew beracha, blessing, and salud, Spanish. So it's linguistically, it typifies, of course, the the mixture that we have in our language. And the other reason is because we are full of good wishes for everybody all the time. Once in a while, we have some very bad wishes also for people we don't like. But normally, I think that Sephardic culture is one of love, especially love of family, love of people, love of life. So this is one. And the other one is, at least in Izmir, where I grew up, we use very much, and that is shukr al-dio. Shukr comes from Arabic, but it's really Turkish. We got it from the Turks, is thanks. And whenever we are full, we have eaten well, we say, shukr al-dio. Whenever we have been waiting for somebody and he appears, we say, shukr al-dio ya vino. He's arrived. So there again, we have our belief in God, al-dio, which we use all the time, very, very often, and shukr coming via Turkish from Arabic origin. So those are the sayings. And the proverb is, el que bien se quiere en poco lugar cabe. People who love each other can live in a small place. You don't need mansions. You don't need the riches of the world. If you love somebody, that's it's essential. And to me, that represents the Sephardic worldview. And I also think linguistically, I don't think in Spanish you would say it in that way.
Great.
And
Thank you,
yes,
Rachel.
one more thing, if I may point out, that to me is very important. Querer bien is our word for love, true love, not amor, which is passing. You can be enamorado, in love with somebody, but that can pass. But querer bien is the essence of love, to want the good for somebody.
Merci, Rachel. Let's turn it over to Karen, please.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you for inviting me, Devin, whom I've known for years and years and years and years now. Well, I chose two sayings. One of them is, I think, is self-explanatory, and it shows a philosophy of life, actually experience of life, and knowing what is going to happen. It's not so optimistic, but that is what life is about. So this is it. Cuando da el padre, ríe el hijo. Cuando da el hijo, llora el padre, llora el hijo. When it is the father that gives, both father and son are smiling. When it is the son that gives, both father and son are crying, which means that as long as the parents are giving their children things, then everybody's happy. But when it comes, well, when it is the children's turn to kind of reciprocate, then life is not that happy. I think that is quite self-explanatory, but it carries a lot of experience, a lot of living that reflects this, that is reflected in this saying. And the second one is, I think, more fun. It's se levantaron los pipinos a jarvar el bachevan. And here we see that the cucumbers have risen to beat up the gardener. Now, what does this mean? I mean, the cucumbers have risen up to beat the gardener. I mean, what is going on here? So the cucumbers are the green young people who kind of lift their heads and try to teach their elders what life is about. So they, it's not their place really to kind of go against the advice or the knowledge or the wisdom of their elders, but that's what they do usually, which we see very, very often. So the cucumbers have risen, and they have attacked the gardener. Now here we have a mixture of languages. Bahçevan is in Turkish, which means gardener. Harvar, I think it's in Hebrew. Just correct me if I'm wrong. Yes. So you have like all three languages, Hebrew, Spanish, Turkish, all mixed up, but that is how we speak. That is what Ladino is. It's a mixture of cultures. It's a mixture of languages. That's it.
Merci mucho. Okay, thank you. Eliezer, Papo.
Yeah, okay. So I would go for something that has to do with identity, being the fact that my scholarship mostly deals with identity, at least recently. So I would go for a proverb which says, "Basta mi nombre Abravanel." It's enough that my family name is Abravanel. And this is kind of very special. Sephardim use it to say, basically, the meaning is you can be the poor of the poorest, and still the verse from the prophet Ovadia applies to you. There is a verse in Prophet Ovadia which says, "Galut Yerushalayim asher bisfarad," the expulsees of Jerusalem who live in Sepharad, in Spain. Traditionally, it was considered to be to mean Spain. So this is kind of not only of self-perception, but also of behavior. There is plenty of stories in Jerusalem where you have 9 months of summer, so not every single house had a kitchen, and people used to bring their stuff to the bakery. And then the people who were poor and didn't have anything to bring to bakery, they would put a stone into the thing, right? And then send it to bakery so that everybody else would think that they have their food. So this is something that in Ladino you refer to fidalgia. In Sarajevo we say fidalgos. And it's kind of aristocratic feeling. Then when we established at my university, at Ben Gurion University of the Negev, we wanted to show to our donors that we also care. And also we wanted to show the donors and the intellectuals who are giving contribution to Ladino culture. So we invented something called Ladino chivalry, right? We established an order, right? And then the son of the late President Navon joined after we have already established the order. And I promised him that the order will be called after his father. And that's why we added a motto of the order, which somehow resembles this Basta mi nombre Abravanel approach. Basically, we have added a saying in Arabic, Inna al-kirama qalilu. The nobility is really rare. And this was a phrase from a song written by the most famous Judeo-Arab singer from the Jahiliyyah period, in other words, from before the rise of Islam. And the song is singing about how some woman came to him and told him, what do you Jews want? You are only a few. And he responded her saying, Ina al-kirama qalilu. The nobility is always rare. So to make a long story short, sometimes the Sephardim themselves use this proverb ironically. So they say, basta mi nombre Abravanel, alevanto la colcha y me echo sin comer. It's enough that my second name is Abravanel, and then I can just, pick my blanket and go to sleep without eating. So basically it's used ironically, but in all that irony, you can still see this self-perception of the nobility of Jerusalem that ended in Spain, because when the verse in the prophet says the expulsees of Jerusalem, it basically means that the Jews of Spain were original Jerusalemites. And who were the original Jerusalemites? Well, the aristocracy of the priests and the aristocracy, the kings and marquis and graf and all these. So yes, this is a part of that culture. And the language can die, might die, but this will be the last Sephardic thing to die.
The chivalry. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Eliezer. Okay, let's turn it over to Nesi for your insight here.
My proverb also kind of speaks to the social reality, more of the 19th and 20th century of Istanbul and late Ottoman Turkey. It's espantate de un judío rico, un turco prove y un griego borracho. So it is beware of a rich Jew, a poor Turk, and a drunk Greek. So the three characters that populate the lives of Jews at this era. So what does this mean? First of all, the important thing to notice is the speaker himself is poor. So this is the language of not of elites especially in the 20th century, but of the poorer Jews who are warning each other about the rich people of their own community. So like we see this like class divergence among Jews. Also fearing of the poor Turk as a poor Jew, because you live in a country where you are not an equal citizen. So even if you're economically similar, anything you have, the jealousy of the Turk can harm you. And of course, the punchline is that the drunk Greek is a character to be afraid of, because it's the Greeks who are the neighborhood tough guys in the areas that Jews used to live in, especially in Istanbul. And also they are associated with drinking, especially because they would run all the restaurants and the drinking establishments.
Great, that's great. Well, we don't have anything to drink at our for our Ladino Day this year, but hopefully in the future we'll have an opportunity to be in person for some raki, perhaps. I want to now move into getting a little bit more of a sense of each of how you got into the work, scholarship and activism related to Ladino. And it's one thing to be familiar with a language or a culture, but it's another thing to dedicate yourself, either aspects of your personal, professional life, to studying or promoting it. And so I guess I'd like to ask a two-part question here, which is, could each of you tell us a little bit about how you entered into the field of Ladino activism or Ladino scholarship, and what do you see as each of you are involved in many different things, but if you could just pick out one area, one project, one enterprise that you're working on that you'd like to share or that you think is really significant at this time, please do so. And let's keep our responses brief if we can, and let's go in reverse order this time. So I'll start with Nesi first, if you don't mind.
Sure. So I am also from Istanbul. I didn't grow up speaking Ladino basically at all. By the time I was growing up, Ladino was not a language of daily use for anyone around me. And it was really after I started learning modern Spanish in school, which among French and German, all the Jews picked. It was really then that I began maybe seeing a resonance with the language, especially because my great-grandpa Papo would, at that point in his 90s, basically stop speaking Turkish completely and had reverted only to speaking Ladino. So really that was made me aware for the first time of this language that was around. And it was actually after I started writing about current affairs in Turkey, in Avlaremoz, that I arrived at this desire to learn Ladino and work for its visibility, because I became more aware of what was taken away, what happened that made this language get so weak in the country that I grew up in. Why wasn't it that my family didn't communicate it to me when I was growing up? So that political awareness really brought me back to the language. And I would say one of the projects I'm working on now is restoring that sort of line of communication, is a picture book that Karan also has helped on, and hopefully will be published. We're still seeking financial support. The project is actually finished. It's an introduction for new learners, mostly intended for children, but really of any new learners, to learn 1,000 daily words from like kitchen and household items to, you know, things you would buy at a store, the street, or like going to different places like a hospital. What words would a speaker of Ladino need if they were going about their daily lives? So to introduce the speaker through not translation, but images, just to communicate the language on its own, because I think, which Karen also talks about all the time, this is a language that can stand on its own. It doesn't need to be supported by translation all the time. So I think that was why the picture book project was so important for me. And I really hope it'll hit everyone's homes next year.
Okay, Si Karel Dio, that's great. What is it? Does it have a working title?
Mi Mundo en Ladino is the current title.
Very nice. And how do you deal with stuff that exists now that didn't exist, you know, then? Did you have to make up any words, or did you?
Just one.
What did you make up?
Just one word. It was by committee in one of the many Ladino WhatsApp groups. Gusano de Mazal, which is a thing that existed earlier, but we really weren't able to locate a word for it, which is ladybug. So Karen and I and people in this group were talking, and how do you say ladybug? And we decided that using a Hebrew word like mazal with a Spanish word like gusano, meaning bug. So
Lucky
bug
bug.
of luck is also the way of saying it in Turkish. So it really brings together the Hebrew, the Spanish, and the Turkish in that word.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. All right. Well, we'll look forward to Mi Mundo en Ladino. That's great. Fantastic. Okay, Eliezer, can you tell us a little bit, of your trajectory and a project?
Okay. Well, trajectory. First of all, when I was growing up in Sarajevo, in the Jewish community of Sarajevo, there was a lot of Sephardic pride, but it was not language related. The language was considered to be jargon, a mixture of languages. People would use sentences like, how do you say in a real Spanish? So I would say, what does that mean? So is the Spanish that we are speaking subreal, unrealistic, or whatever? But no, they couldn't really grasp the irony. So the elders would say, I mean the real Spanish of the real Spaniards, right? So then I would refer to the fact that many a time Bosnian Sephardim call themselves Spagnoli, right? Which means Españoles. So I would say, but you call yourself Spagnoli, right? You would say to a certain elder in the community, you call yourself Spaniol, so how come you are not a real one? So he would say, the real Spanish of the real Spaniards from Spain. Then I would say, but Sephardim are also from Spain, aren't they? And this is when you would get like something like, and that's it, the end of the story. So basically, there was a lot of pride in Sephardic tradition, but there was no pride in the language. And I really believe that everybody's involvement, not only my personal, in the establishment of the Ladino Academy recently, the Israeli National Academy for Ladino Language, will help Sephardim get out of the trauma imposed on them by their previous elites, which taught the general public that Sephardic language is not really a language. It doesn't really have a grammar, as if it was possible to speak any kind of, first of all, if it's a language, it has a grammar. There is no such a thing as language without a grammar, right? But if you go and ask, well, today the things are changing, being the fact that the academy was established, and it's not that I'm now exaggerating, how this academy is doing this and that, but even if it doesn't do anything, the mere fact that it was established will change the perception of the language amongst the Sephardim themselves, because the fact that the Spanish Royal Academy accepts Ladino Academy, and then that there are other 22 academias hermanas, or sister academies, and all of them, the mother and 22 sisters, do recognize Ladino Academy as the equal sister, right? This helps. Today, you can't hear anymore not in Turkey, not in Israel, not in Bulgaria, not in Yugoslavia. You can't hear people, not even the elders, I mean today's elders, and certainly not today's middle generation, saying stupidities such as, it's not a language, it's a jargon, it's a mixture of languages, and so on. We still need to fix the strange relationship we have with the Turkish strata of our own language, because many people start laughing when you use Turkish words. Then they say, oh, it's not Ladino, it's Turkish. And you say, so how do you say it in Ladino? And he says, oh, we don't have a word. So I say, maybe that's because the word I just used is the Ladino word. And they say, oh, no, that's Turkish. So not extremely intelligent, but we need to change. We need to change that also, because if you pick from Hebrew all Aramaic words, you will stay without 20 to 30% of the language. If you pick from Turkish, even today, post-reform, purified Turkish, if you pick out the Arabic and the Persian words, you will not have a language. You will stay without 30% of language. If you take English and you kick out the French words, not only in America, even in Great Britain, people will stay without the language, right? So the same is true about the Sephardim and Turkish. Now, I'm already 53, which makes me kind of old. So now I believe in establishing institutions. In other words, things that will, when I was younger, I believed that it's enough if you personally do something. Now I recognize that, 2 decades, 3 decades, and see you by. So yes, I would like to establish things. So to make a long story short, I'm concentrating now recently, in the last 10 years already, in establishing the genres that otherwise wouldn't be recognized as genres. So it can be the magic spellings, which everybody knows were there, but they were never established as a genre, and they are a literary genre. Then the Sephardic parodies on Passover Haggadah, and here's something being the fact that we have enormous American audience tonight. I would like to point out the fact that a Sephardic newspaper called Lavara in New York published almost every single year a parody on Passover Haggadah. Now, I cannot touch up on that because I don't know enough about Sephardic actualia in America, because they are actually using the language of Haggadah to make fun of their own internal things. But somebody should. And again, that's another thing that I try to establish. In other words, a genre which otherwise wouldn't be recognized. And right now, I'm working on Me'am Lo'ez. I want to make a scientific edition of the entire Me'am Lo'ez in Ladino, in both Hebrew script and Latin script.
For those who don't know, could you tell us the Kitzur, just in 2 words, what Me'am Lo'ez is? How would you describe it if somebody were just say, what is the Me'am Lo'ez?
Okay, in a single sentence, Me'am Lo'ez would be the Sephardic Talmud. In other words, just the way the Talmud takes Mishnah and then discusses it in different ways that bring the law and the anecdotes and the folklore and the whatever. The same thing happens here with Torah, the Bible, basically, the Hebrew Bible, because the Sephardic sages took different biblical books and discussed them around the biblical text. You have this entire discussion which also summarizes the halacha, sometimes history, sometimes concepts and beliefs, sometimes sayings and folklore, but it's all around the biblical verses. So it's made in the form of a commentary, but the best way to understand it is to call it Sephardic late Talmud.
Bravo, very nice. Thank you, Eliezer. That's a great way I'm going to use that with my students. That's a really great way to explain it. Thank you. Okay, Karen, please share with us.
Yes, well, I mean, the beginning of what I'm going to say is all what Eliezer said, because we're not so far away from each other. It's he Sarajevo, me Istanbul, so not very far away. and about the snobism of the peoples, and looking down upon Ladino as being not a language, etc. I just want to add that it is okay to add words from French, à la française, always, but it's not okay to borrow words from Turkish. I mean, this is the attitude. It's okay if you use a French word, but it's not okay if you use a Turkish word. Extremely prejudiced against borrowing from Turkish, extremely prejudiced. But I grew up hearing this language all around me, even though the family of the language of my family was French. But my mother used to say, estoy hablando español, el nuestro. So I'm speaking Spanish, but our Spanish, meaning there was, or el español jalis no se dice así, or, in the real Spanish, real, as if ours is fake, it's not said like that. But my interest started when I was 18 and joined a Jewish youth club where we performed plays, musicals in Ladino. And the most important of them was Kula 1930, which became a classic. And this was the point where I got interested in the language and the culture. My friends and I started by making fun of our elders. And then we were caught up in the magic of the language and the culture itself. So, and then I wrote my master's thesis on Ladino, and it was like something in 1982, 83, this was the first master's thesis written in Turkey about it. So, it was, and then it went on and on and on and on. So what I have always wanted, not in academia, I'm not in academia, I just head the research center. I want to publish enough material for future generations. And I'm not wasting my time trying to learn the old scripts and reading old manuscripts, etc. That is not what I'm about. That I leave to the academics because they're doing a great work. That's not what I'm about. I am trying to get the modern language into material for future generations. That's what I'm about. And as I'm 10 years older than Eliezer, I am quite older than you are. So I really, 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 when I was 50, when I got to be 50, I decided I have to transmit what I know to the next generation. And I'm so glad Nesi is one of them. No, really, I mean, I'm so glad that at least we have, very few, but at least we have a few young people who are interested and who might continue the work that we started.
I would say, the 1010 book that you just put out. So you put out a translation of maybe some of you know, or Tintin, probably we say it in the States, this from mid 20th century cartoon character, and Karen just put out an edition, a Ladino edition of this, and there's not a lot of literature out there that are easily accessible for children. And I have all of the stuff, there's in Latin script that's readily available. There's the Iliad and the Odyssey. We're not going to be reading that with a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and even Alice in Wonderland in the Ladino translation. That's a very complicated story. And reading my children 1010 in Ladino, they're glued to these. I think it's the violence partly, but it's and the mystery. but it's the, it's the mystery and the story, but they want to hear the next page. I can't get them to go to bed at night because they want to hear more of 1010. So that's a great accomplishment already, and I hope that there will be a lot more of that in the future.
Hopefully, yes, we need a lot more things for children.
Yeah. So Rochelle, please tell us a little bit about your own trajectory and a project you're working on.
Well, first I have to say that my dates will seem to you young people as ancient history, but in 1973, after my father died, my mother came to visit me in St. Louis, Missouri. And a neighbor came over to visit us. And he heard us speaking in Spanish, in our Spanish. And he says to me, "Oh, you are speaking Ladino. I thought that was a dead language." This was 1973. I had been in the United States for a few years, and I had never met another Sephardic person, but to me, Ladino was a living language. I mean, we all spoke Ladino. I grew up in Izmir. We did not have the snobism that Istanbulis have, or at least not in our area of Izmir, where the language of the Jews was Ladino. I mean, I went to the Bacal, the grocer, and I said, "Dame medio kilo de habas." Everybody spoke Ladino. There was no snobism at all about the language. That was our language, and we couldn't imagine being Jewish and not knowing the language. So this statement, I will never forget how I felt. On the one hand, it was good that somebody had heard of Sephardic Jews and had heard of Ladino, because that was the first time I heard an American recognize that there was such a thing. And but on the other hand, a dead language, that's ridiculous. I mean, so that was my first shock that said to me, you have to do something. I used to be very shy and never said anything in American company, not because I knew the language, but my character. But then I decided that I had to do something. We started with organizing something at our synagogue, so-called Sephardic Kala, and so on. But I would say that my biggest contribution might be, first, I always say I founded Los Amigos Sefaradis in the Bay Area when we moved to the San Francisco Bay Area, only for nostalgia, because that was 1985, and by then I had lost most of the people that I spoke the language with, my aunts, uncles, and so on, and my parents. And so I found for the first time when we moved to the Bay Area, other Sephardic people that spoke my language. Many of them were Holocaust survivors, which I had never met one before. I formed the organization called Los Amigos Sefaradis purely for nostalgic reasons. I just wanted to speak up my language with somebody. But as the more I got into it, the more I fell in love with my language, the more I thought that it was very valuable. And so I corresponded with a writer in Shalom, whose name was, Karen will know, Sion Cohen Yanarojak. Of course, with Moshe Shaul, I was always in touch since the 70s. Especially when he started the Aki Yerushalayim. And so I was invited to this Congress in 1999 in Jerusalem that discussed how to spell Ladino and Latin characters. That's where Moshe Shaul came up with the idea that we should use the internet, which was then a new thing, to use our language, correspond in the language, and promote the effort to standardize that Aki Yerushalayim had started, to standardize the spelling, the orthography. And so I came back and did that. I started Ladinokomunita, and to me, that is the most important contribution that I have personally made because it's not just that we use the language, but if you go to the website and our files on, you find treasures of life in the stories of how life was, what it means, jokes, sayings, everything about our culture in the language of our culture. Again, like Karen, my focus is to keep the language living, and therefore the efforts of Karen and Nesi especially to provide material for the future generations is very important. Of course, if you ask me, what we also need is more opportunity for talking, for actually using. And maybe that's another subject that you want to get into.
Well, thank you for sharing, Rachel. I mean, I think what we see with our panelists here is that we have people of, a range of ages and generations, people who, nobody here grew up in a home speaking the same language, which is also interesting. And only one of us grew up at home speaking Ladino as the language of every day, right? Which is Rachel. And so that's really fascinating. And so to think that, there are quite a number of decades that extend between the older of the panelists and the younger, and we, despite that, and despite geographic differences and cultural differences and a variety of other differences, there's this shared theme that is coming through here about a desire to bring this language into the future, to validate it, to legitimize the language as a language. And I think that's very potent and a very powerful kind of a goal and aspiration that I think we all share, and that is expressed in the various different, very important projects that each of you are embarked upon. And so I guess for my next question, I'd like to get a little bit more into how you see the status of the language. Rachel mentioned in the 1970s already, somebody saying, I thought that Ladino was dead. And in the 1990s, a linguist wrote a book called The Death of a Language, which was about Ladino. And now we're like 30 years later, and here we are, we had over 500 people sign up for a Zoom session to talk about Ladino. So what does it mean? How do you diagnose the status of Ladino? Is it a language that you see as a living language? It is a moribund language. What would you say is the status of the language right now? Is it a vernacular anymore? Has it entered, as some people have suggested, a post-vernacular phase in which the language has an additive function, a symbolic function, rather than an everyday kind of communication function, but rather as a symbol of, identity? When people use Ladino, are they just saying, by other words, I am Sephardi, or is there something else going on there? Maybe let's start with Eliezer here first.
Yeah, well, when I only arrived to Israel, which was in 1991, immediately I felt something was missing, and it was Ladino of the native community. So I started attending all kinds of Ladino meetings, and I was the youngest in the group. I mean, the average was like 70, and I was 20 something at the time. And the people who were 50 years old, they were just coming to leave their parents, and then they would come later, 2 hours later, to pick them up. So the feeling was that it was somehow dying. And then at that moment, I was attending a Sephardic yeshiva in the old city of Jerusalem. And there was a good friend of mine from New York, from Brooklyn, and he was Halabi. He was a Syrian Jew from the city of Aleppo, second or third generation, basically third generation American. And he started attending together with me those Ladino meetings in 92, 93. And then after some time, he told me, Eliezer, can I tell you something, but only if you are not going to get offended? And I was like, yes. And he was, you guys are crazy. You know that, right? And I'm like, what? And he's like, well, you meet here, and then somebody says, do you know this song? And then everybody starts singing it. And then somebody else says, do you remember this proverb? And then everybody starts quarreling because they have a different ending of the proverb or different version of the proverb or different context of application. And then somebody starts telling the story, and then everybody else says, oh, no, that's not the way to end it. No, that's not the word to use. No, that's not the way to start. No, that's not. And then by the end of the meeting, you say, oh, it's pity nobody remembers all of this anymore. And then I was like, yeah, because I was used to this. This was the rhetorics. This was the nostalgic rhetorics typical of the Jewish community of Sarajevo. And when I came to Jerusalem, it wasn't different. So I was like, yeah, and so what? And he was, well, listen, I'm very proud Halabi Jew. I don't know a single saying. I don't know a single song in Judeo-Arabic. I don't know a single story. And I'm still very proud. And I never cry that I don't know things, because if I wanted to know them, I would probably know them. It's just that we can live with our melodies and our kitchen, and we don't need the Judeo-Arabic language in order to feel great about ourselves. But if I was to know any of those, I would certainly not cry. And then this actually helped me. This actually helped me put things into proportion. Basically, when you look to what's going on in the modern world, 21st century, we know much more than many other communities. At the same time, this is much less than previous generations, but you never know. And being the fact that I suppose that your next question will be what to do about it, I will just leave it here.
Okay.
This is how I feel what we have today. We have more than many others. We have less than what we would like to have. And I will leave it there at the moment.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Eliezer. That's fascinating that you got a perspective from your Halabi friend there that helped clarify some things a little bit. That's very, very significant. Let's go to Nesi.
So when I first started trying to use Ladino more and more, and I learned mostly from reading Amaneser with the Perahia dictionary. That was my first teacher. I would sometimes read it at home, and I'd like to read it out loud just so I learn better. My mother would say, oh, it's like there's a tantika sitting in the salon, like an auntie, because it's really the language is so associated in people's minds with old women specifically, that it's a language of women who are older. So I think the material that a lot of old women who write for Amaneser create for young people is so important. And I've noticed since I've started talking and using Ladino, the people I grew up with in Istanbul are interested. They want to make time. They want to have resources to hear more. And they know much, as Eliezer said, they know much more than they realize. Once you start talking about Ladino and we have a conversation, the next day people will text me, I thought of another saying. I thought of another saying that my family has. One that I'd never heard of course, because every family has their own stuff. So you really see that there's this intense desire, I would say, to reclaim as much as possible. So I think this idea of it's dead, it's dying is, I don't know, not only is it not true, it's also not relevant to how I engage with Ladino. I'm not really interested in debates about but is it a language of daily life or is it in the post-vernacular? What's our status? Because it can be one for another and the other for other people. It's important to use it. If as many people use it in one of those ways, that ensures vitality in my book, I would say. So I think the biggest direction that I would like to go in is producing as much material as possible. For me, Ladino now is a language of literature, because as there's a lot of literature that I never knew about that I want to put out there as much as possible. So something that I did over the summer with the help of Karen, and then I talked to Rachel about it as well, was a transliterated novella from Victor Levi, who was an author in late 19th century Istanbul. And now I am reading this novella with 4 other people who learned Ladino during COVID from the internet, mostly from Brian Kirshen, who also live in Montreal. We meet in person to talk up, to read and discuss this book. And because it was published in Amaneser, because me and another person, Michael Zalta, made the effort to transliterate it, to bring it out from the archives into modern readers. And like me and 4 other people who live in Montreal are interested in reading it together every week. So that's a big change, I would say. These are all people in their 20s and early 30s.
Why are they interested? Why are they interested?
I think they're interested because this is a new way of engaging with Jewishness that, like through language, that seems close to a lot of, I would say, assimilated people in the US and Canada into English, in Israel to Hebrew, in Turkey into Turkish, to engage with being Jewish in a new way. And it's not that hard, I think, is another draw of Ladino, honestly, because of the cultural exposure to modern Spanish is so wide. And for someone who knows either Turkish or French or Italian, it's not that difficult to learn it. You just have to want and have resources. So it's really, if we have as many resources as possible, people want to learn it, is what I'll say about that.
Fantastic. Great. I hope there will be many more people who will join that group and all of the other initiatives. So how about Rochelle? How do you understand this question of the status of the language?
Well, if you mean that is the language going to return to be a home language again, or a communal language again, as the one that I grew up in, the answer is no. It's not going to be a daily language and it isn't in anybody's home that I know of, or in, well, that's, yes, Devin makes a heroic effort, but I suspect that even there, it's not the dominant language. I don't know. If it is, it's unique. I think it was Karen who mentioned that we, or at least I feel that my generation I feel very guilty, and I felt very guilty for a long time that I didn't teach the language to my children. And I felt that it was my generation who killed the language as a home, as a language of identity. And I really liked Nesi's work and expression of how important it is for young people to embrace the language as part of their identity. Because if you can't be a Turkish Jew and deny this language. I mean, that's what kept us Jewish, really, in the Ottoman Empire. So on the other hand, I'm also very proud of my generation and the generations represented with the panelists here for the efforts that we have made to bring this language back to life, really. I use Ladino more these days than I did for many years. We have the encontros every Sunday, which are wonderful, where we speak only in Ladino. And I am now involved in translating a wonderful book from Spanish, which is written in the style of the old romanzas, with the rhyme and rhythm of the Sephardic romanzas in Spanish by Paloma Diaz-Mas from Spain. We're translating those, we have a group, we work together to translate these into Ladino. and they're it's a children's book. And so we have very interesting discussions. We only speak Ladino, these last like about 2 hours once or twice a week. So I'm so happy. It's just it's not true to say that the language is dead or dying. It's coming back. And so I'm very optimistic, and to see people like Nesi and others, young people interested, it's wonderful.
Thank you, Rochelle. I mean, I try to still speak with my kids as much as I can in Ladino, but they're now responding more and more in English just because of the environment. But I can bribe them in certain ways to extract more Ladino out of them. Sometimes they when I'm not looking, or when they think I'm not looking, I see them say things to each other in Ladino, and there's no greater feeling than when that happens. So Karen, how do you evaluate this question in terms of the status of the language from your perspective?
Well, I'll tell you something that the others haven't touched upon, that the pandemic, unfortunate though it was, became a renaissance for Ladino. Suddenly, people, being stuck at home, suddenly people tried to look for their roots, and suddenly everyone was interested in Ladino and learning Ladino. So, I mean, I was shocked that when I, gave a course on Zoom, that every lesson from all over I got 80 people present. I mean, that never happened before. 80 people present in a lesson, and then later on, I was watching, because they recorded it. Hundreds of people were watching the classes. I mean, incredible. But not only that, even before the pandemic, we put to life a project that 1 year we taught one word a day. I thought, I mean, Henry Chiprut, de Bendicha Memoria, was the one who suggested that with Emel Benbasad, and we had a visual something, one word every day in Ladino, translated to 3 other languages, Turkish, English, and Spanish. And now they're all on our website, Sepharad.com.tr. And plus, they were a huge success. They were on social media, Instagram, Facebook. And then I opened WhatsApp groups. Hundreds of people subscribed to those groups. And it was possible for me also to pronounce the word so that they could hear how it was pronounced. So it was a mixture. It was audio and visual. And then 1 year it was that. And then the next year we went on to one phrase a day. And that went on for another year. So those words and the phrases are all on our website. So for people who want to learn, okay, they're there. And so many, I was surprised to see that so many people wanted to learn. I mean, unfortunately, you need you need a language teacher to be able to teach the language. And I'm the only language teacher around here who knows Ladino and who can teach it. So I have to write my own material. I mean, that's what I did when I taught in Cervantes for a year in Ladino. And yes, a lot of people came, just like Nesi said. I mean, people, yes, are interested. They are interested, but we have to facilitate things for them. We have to facilitate their life in order to be able to learn.
Yeah,
But
sure.
definitely not dead, not dying.
We're missing Ladino 102s. There's a lot of great Ladino 101s, great introductory grammars, not a lot of Ladino 102. So that's something we need to.
I know.
I don't
I know.
know.
So as a final question, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A, and I'll start with you, Karen, on the last question here. If money were not an issue, what kind of program would you design? What kind of initiative? What do you think is what would your dreams for the future of Ladino be? What would you like to see happen?
You've opened the Pandora's box.
Just in brief.
If money was not, first of all, I would design, I'm qualified for that. I would design a whole education system for Ladino, starting from children to, well, if God gives me enough life, children, adolescents, and adults. And it would be beginners, intermediate, advanced, just like Nesi said, okay, we have 101s, which I did, okay. Now we have to go on to 102s, but this all takes time. And of course, we need the material for people. We need the material, we need exercise books, we need a lot of things. We need so many things. And yes,
like a robust curriculum, essentially, that would be applicable to all levels and all ages. Is this something that you imagine people doing on their own time, or do you imagine bringing that to schools, whether in Turkey or the US or Israel?
Well, school is a dream. I mean, we have a Jewish school here from kindergarten to the end of lycée. Not interested at all. They don't want anything to do with Ladino. They have Spanish teachers, but
so they're stuck in the mentality that Eliezer was speaking about, the Halis. They want the real Spanish.
No, well,
practical Spanish.
You know something? They want, well, they have Hebrew teachers as well, and they come out knowing maybe 2 words of Hebrew, 0. I mean, so. They're not doing a good job, and Ladino is non-existent.
Okay. How about Eliezer? How would you answer that question in terms of, where do you see Ladino? What is the future of Ladino? Where would you like to see energy and effort placed in terms of developing Ladino? Which domains?
Well, first of all, besides the academy, where, especially in Israel, as a Jewish state, we will eventually translate all the masterpieces and later all the pieces in Ladino to Hebrew. And this is something that needs to be done because we want to make Ladino culture not only accessible to the Sephardim or the Ladino-speaking Sephardim, but to everybody here, in order that it could. Actually, I believe that Sephardic faith is one of the happiest Jewish faces in history. And now Israel as a sovereign state needs to acquire that happy face and to, I don't need to elaborate anymore on that one. Now, diaspora wisely, I would like to see more connection, a bigger connection between the Jews of Latin America and Ladino enthusiasts. Why? Because we might have what they might miss. I've met different educational workers in South America, and they are all how to make their kids speak more Hebrew, and how to how to fortify their Jewish identity. And it could be so much easier if people who already speak Spanish were to have activities in Judeo-Spanish that would foster their Jewish identity, and that would also bring a tremendous help to Ladino, because we are speaking of millions of people. Then another thing that I would like to see, and we are stupid for not recognizing the tremendous capacity over there. There are hundreds of thousands of people who claim to be converso descendants. And the Sephardic tradition was always to open the doors and help them accommodate, and then even if some were not, they will become. This was how the Sephardic Jews treated in the Ottoman Empire. how the Sephardic Jews in 16th century, 17th century, 18th century treated the people who would come and say, our forefathers were Jews who were forced to convert in Spain.
Right. Okay, I'm sorry to cut you off, Eliezer, but we're short on time a little bit. So I just want to give the other folks a chance to respond. So we have curriculum, we have corpus of texts and international or transnational connections, especially along Spanish lines. Nesi, would you like to offer quickly one other dream you might have, and then Rachel?
Publishing in Latin script, not translation. Ladino literature publishing is what I think the
original works.
Original from the past and also contemporary, if we can get people to write. The lack of institutional support is the biggest problem. Like it shouldn't take a year for me to find like a few $1,000s to get this picture book off the ground. That's the sorry state we are in today.
So great. So original composition. So bringing the historical corpus, curriculum, connection, and original creativity. Rachel, you get the final word on the question.
Children are very important. If we could have schools in the way, for example, that I learned English in an American school, and that would be great. But I want to point out in today's encontro, Eliezer said something that I thought was a great idea. He didn't mention it here. He said, and first let me preface by saying that in Israel, Turkish novellas, telenovelas, series are very popular. And speaking with my sister-in-law who lives there, says it's so funny. She said, in the beginning, when I spoke Turkish with my friends and so on, people didn't know what language that was. Now everybody recognizes, oh, you're speaking Turkish. Why? Because they watch these series. If we can have a television series in Ladino where they see people speaking and interacting, because again, my focus is much like Karen said, I admire and I've learned a lot from the academics who are transcribing all those wonderful old books and explaining them and so on. But I just want them to be, I want the language to be used. And I think television is a wonderful, or even YouTube videos is a wonderful tool. We need also institutions to encourage. I would like the academics to also stress the use of the language, not just the study of it.
Thank you, Rachel. I mean, I think you pointed to yet another element on the horizon, the television and YouTube. My kids would really benefit from Ladino cartoons, I think, something like that. That would be really amazing. I feel like we've just really grazed the surface over the past hour, unfortunately, but we have to be wrapping up. And I want to thank all of you for your insights and your observations right now. And I want to open up time. We have time for a few questions here, and one of them, and maybe just one or two sentence response to these questions. Do any of you think or dream in Ladino these days?
I do. I dream in Ladino often.
Are your dreams in Ladino about the future of Ladino?
No, no, it's just the people that have populated my life.
That's great. And I guess, let me see here. Let's see. Sorry here. How people want to know how they can support your projects. How do they do it?
Well, depending on what skills they have, they should email me.
Okay.
Yes,
okay. Anybody can contact me, obviously.
And we'll show. We'll give pointers.
Okay.
In my case, it's easy. We have American Associates of BGU. So they should communicate them and say that they want specifically to donate for the Ladino Center at Ben Gurion University.
Okay, great. And another question that we have from the audience is, do you think in terms of institutionalizing the study of Ladino or creating the various kinds of academies that Eliezer mentioned and that are going on here, do you see the role of that organizational effort to be prescriptive like some of the other academies? I mean, how do you deal with the diversity of dialects and the diversity of approaches to the language? How do you, or do you think the goal should be to create, this is Ladino, or do we say, well, this is Sarajevo Ladino, this is Istanbul, this is Izmir, this is Monastir, this is Salonique? How do you deal with all of that? Who wants to take the question?
I can respond in a single sentence. The Sephardic Jews were Jewish always. And as Jews, they always had the language of high culture, which is Hebrew. So all the puristic notions and everything in Sephardic traditional culture is Hebrew oriented, not Ladino oriented. The Ladino is, you know, when the rabbis write in Ladino, they say Jungueves, not Jueves, Jungueves. There is no more popular form than that, or poverenta instead of saying poveretta. Why? Because all their dreams about normativization and high language and so on were Hebrew related. We should keep it that way. So Ladino, all the dialects are equally welcome, and the academy should rule out only the obvious lack of knowledge. That's when people use normal form instead of subjunctive, and they think whatever, when they mix those and so on. So whatever is wrong in all the dialects is wrong, but whatever is good in any dialect should be recognized by the academy as Ladino.
But the question arises often when we're doing such translations into Ladino as to which word to use.
You are always
will not
translating to a
offend
certain
people of the other dialects.
Depends what you are translating. If you are translating a drama, you need to collocate it in a certain context. So you can translate it only to a certain dialect. You cannot translate it into a mixture of dialects. But if you are translating a scientific article, you can use words originating in different dialects, certainly.
Nesi, did you want to add something there?
Less about the welcoming dialects. I think the point has been well said, but I am concerned that there is efforts to monopolize ownership of the language by Spain and like as a cultural product of Spain, or by Autoridad Nacional of Israel as a cultural product of Israelis. And I think that sort of boxes the language into countries, which is something we want to avoid.
Okay. Great. Very nice. A final question, and then we have to unfortunately wrap up, which is a question about demographics. How many Ladino speakers? This is a question that always comes up. How do you evaluate this? Even how do you begin to answer the question of how many people are speaking Ladino? How many people are interested in Ladino? Funders might want to know how many people will use the sources that you create. And other than thousands or millions, how do you understand the question of demographics? Anybody want to take that? No.
Here's what I'll say about that. I think if we publish this picture book, the first printing of 1,000 will be done out in a year. That's the level of interest that I see, that we can sell 1,000 books in less than a year.
I would like to add something. There's a beautiful Sephardic story, rabbinical Sephardic story, which says a guy comes to the rabbi. He says, "I'm 70 years old. Now I would like to learn." And the rabbi gives him a book, and the guy comes tomorrow and he says, "Oh no, I'm a lost case. I'm too old now to learn anything. When I start reading tomorrow, I forget what I read yesterday." And sometimes even during the same day. And then the rabbi picks a basket and he sends him with the basket to the sea. And he says bring me some water. The guy says, "In a basket?" And the rabbi says, "Well, who is the rabbi here?" And the guy says, "Okay, you are." So the rabbi says, "Okay, so please go and bring So the guy goes, he comes back, and there is no water in the basket. And the rabbi keeps sending him for 6 times. And then the 7th time, the guy says, come on, Rabbi, I'm too old. If there is anything you want to teach me, just say it. I don't need to go for the 7th time to the water. And the rabbi says, look at the basket. And the guy looks at the basket, and the rabbi says, is there any water? And the guy says, no. And the rabbi says, but is it cleaner? Right. So that's the idea. It's about the process. It's not about the quantity. It's about the process. And all the way we are dealing with it, it's going to be alive. And we can, in fact, as you know, we saw pandemic is actually very encouraging. We saw how you can infect, how few people can infect a lot. So I'm taking it for a better place, to a better place than the pandemics. But yes, I really do believe we can contaminate hundreds of thousands. And it's all the question of process. It's not a question of how much water we brought.
It
Great.
is such an interesting language. It has so many interesting features about it that I think, as we know, many non-Jews and non-Hispanics are interested in the language because it is just so interesting. But whether they will use it daily is another question, and that's what we want.
Well, on that note, we have to unfortunately wrap up, but I want to thank all of our panelists very much. And it's been a wonderful presentation and conversation, and I look forward to picking this up in other venues and other contexts. A lot of interest from the participants in learning more about all of your projects and initiatives, and seems like there's some goodwill, people wanting to get involved and support, and we hope that we can provide you with all of the necessary information to make those connections happen. Thank you again to all of the panelists. Thank you for everybody who's spent their morning, evening, or afternoon with us. And a final thanks to the Sephardic Studies Program and the Strom Center for Jewish Studies and our wonderful staff and all of our supporters and co-sponsors for making today's program a success. Muchas gracias y Alhadeff.
Alhadeff.
Bye.